Good morning. Considering this to be part of a series of videos for my fall term 2023 Heuristics for Teachers, I call it. I've done this before. And part of Heuristics for Teachers, I'm a teacher, you're a teacher. We do show and tell, which seems like a little kid thing, what we call show and tell when I was growing up. You kind of stop doing it after a while, but you really don't. As an adult, you're expected to do PowerPoints, get in front of people, do talks, lightning talks, longer talks, lectures, whatever. You could call those show and tell. I mean, it's a very umbrella term, right? Then we have what's called chalk and talk, where you really are in front of a, say, chalkboard. That's a standard motif, presentation modality. And then this is YouTube. It's another one. But within that show and tell umbrella, there's the thing called show and tell about books, like book sharing. Another thing you can do is have another person and do like interview or exchange, conversation, whatever, right? We're all familiar with all this kind of stuff, right? So this is a book sharing, like I did a last video. I just have 4 books here. Let's see, what order should I go in? I'm going to start with probably the most, maybe, I don't know, controversial. I don't know what to say, and it's hard to come by perhaps. But it's by Mark James, gosh, the name, Estren. And here it is. I hope I get it all. There we go. I can see what it's going to look like. Make sure you can see the whole cover, and it's called A History of Underground Comics by Mark James Estren. And at the time it was $17.95. Whether or not you can find this on Amazon, I'm going to check that. It's a soft cover, obviously, and it's mostly comics. But in the context of essays and, talking about what is the significance of these different movements, these arts, movements, different styles, different artists, different contributions, how this all went forward, and how do you define underground comic. Here's a chapter on suppression. Now, have I read this whole book cover to cover, and am I a master of the content? No, this is the kind of thing I just explore. Like, I'm interested in demented cartoons, you could call them. I was a big fan of Ren and Stimpy, but I only found the time like yesterday literally, to study what went on with Ren and Stimpy. Like, what was the trajectory there? What was the arc? What went on? Who was the artist? Right? Lots to learn. Just giving an example of a territory I like to explore. Whether you consider it good or bad, it's not, to me, it's like, here's a question I have for you as a listener. The 3 Wise Monkeys tale. They talk about 3 wise monkeys, see no evil, hear no evil, and what's the third one? Speak no evil, right? And I've always considered that to be a mocking tale. In other words, we're making fun of these monkeys. Because how can you be wise if you close your eyes, close your ears? Like, if you are taking yourself out of the feedback loops, you're not going to grow, you're not going to mature, and you're going to stay a monkey. Monkey to me means like kind of sub what we would call human intelligence, which is no disrespect to monkeys. They're not supposed to be humans, right? Now, if humans are monkeys, right, then that means they didn't really fully develop. And that's why a monkey as a symbol tends to be like monkey see, monkey do, or when you ape somebody. All these monkey metaphors going through language, they're kind of like we're ridiculing monkeys, aren't we? So the 3 wise monkeys, to me, that's always been how not to be wise. But it seems like a lot of people that I meet in life do have that philosophy that I just need to close my eyes to whole big topics because there's evil there. And therefore I will not look into it because I am going to keep myself innocent of evil. I'm not even going to study it and see that for me that's like not scholarship mindset. The scholar is not going to like blind themselves to what's obvious and what is there to be studied, what is there to be learned. And if you're not going to look into stuff that's quote unquote evil, aren't you like deliberately ignoring a lot of reality or something like this? You know what I'm saying? So anyway, I'm happy to dive into demented cartoons. I mean, come on, Ren and Stimpy, right? And what is the meaning of adult? And this is where I get to just today. I'm looking at this video finally about what is andragogy. The narrator says goji. What is andragogy? Do we say pedagogy, pedagogy? I think it's like a matter of dialect, accent, and so on. So I'm learning more about, who has pushed this concept in the past, because I've taken it on as something I push as well. And for me, andragogy includes connotations of adult, as in adult bookstore, or Adult Swim, which was television network. Kind of like Nickelodeon is for kids, so is Adult Swim for adults. And what is the difference there? There is continuity. There's a spectrum we could talk about. Edgy is a term I've come up with as semi-synonymous with andragogy, but not entirely. It's more like andragogy may include a certain edginess. Okay, next book. This is a Kenneth Snelson book called Full Circle. Now, if you don't know who Kenneth Snelson is or was, he actually is the actual artist who made for me as a gift this tensegrity sculpture. And this is a little one. Now, most of his stuff is really, often, a lot of his stuff is really big, multi-story. Like the Hirshhorn Museum in D.C. has tensegrity tower, and Baltimore has a big one, which I've used on my Facebook forever now. So he and I were friends. I think that's safe to say. We corresponded a lot, and he partly found me because he was interested in who the next generation of people interested in Bucky Fuller was going to be, because he had his story to tell about his relationship, and he felt like he got burned kind of in his relationship with Bucky. It was a long tension between the two. And I feel my role was somewhat to ease that tension, because he found somebody who admired Bucky and admired him, and, wasn't trying to come down hard on some kind of legal case one way or the other. And I think because I kind of helped pave the way for more, like you could say, cordial relations between these camps, a guy like Ed Applewhite got to meet Kenneth Snelson. They got to hang out. Kenneth took him on a tour of his developing studio, which is where this comes in. He used these old cameras, Kenneth Snelson. He's known for these tensegrity sculptures. But he grew up in Eastern Oregon in Pendleton, and his dad ran a camera shop. And he got to play really early on with those kind of cameras that take a 360 degree. That was invented quite a long time ago. And it was back in the age of chemical film and all that, chemical film developing. So when you held down, it's a panorama shot. We can do them with digital now. And the algorithm will stitch them together, and we can pan inside of, say, Facebook or Meta or one of those, and we can. I think Adobe took out the ability to use QuickTime panorama shots inside PDF. If I got Alan Podkin correct on that, PDF can do a lot more than a lot of people realize. So this was early in his career, Kenneth Snelson's, this going to Europe and taking these kind of pictures with that kind of camera, and then having to learn how to develop them. He did all his own developing, in super long baths of chemical, because the film that comes out of these cameras, when you do a full circle shot, right, all the way around, it comes up looking kind of weird, right? You do these narrow alleyways, and they kind of seem to, you think of the topology involved, what you're trying to do, take some narrow street and do 360. What's that going to look like when you develop it as a long strip of film? Okay, now if you put on your headset and you just turn around in space, like sit in a swivel chair, why do we all have swivel chairs? It must have been because they knew the glasses of VR was coming, right? So we could do a VR version of these kind of things where you actually do move your head, maybe get some exercise. A lot of exercise, high-end gyms and stuff now. You can like put on these goggles and run through the Alps, it looks like, or something, whatever you're doing, or bicycling through whatever. That reminds me of another cartoon. Anyway, next book. Well, let's get a Bucky book in here. This is not by Bucky Fuller. This is about. And we took this up in the Trim Tab Book Club. Buckminster Fuller, Inc., Architecture in the Age of Radio. And I think I'll hold this up in connection with my last book, which is Scale. Santa Fe Institute, a guy named Geoffrey West, Scale. Age of Radio. Kind of the reason to have these both on the screen at the same time is because the umbrella concept, unifying concept here in Fuller's lexicon is frequency, right? When you scale something up, you just have this 4D tetrahedron kind of in nowhere space, right? It's kind of quote unquote abstract or imaginary. It's not anchored, just a tetrahedron. Where is it? What is it? You don't know. You haven't really decided. It's basically just a concept. But once you localize your tetrahedron, you make it instantiated as an object, say, like here on my desk or whatever. Like here's a tetrahedron I can just grab. That's made of plastic. It's got this certain lifespan and, whatever. A scenario, that's going to be with frequency added. So you got your 4D, 4 dimensions of space. Again, non-standard, unconventional way of talking. This would normally we'd say 3D, right? But 3D, there's no energy yet, right? When we say space is 3D, yeah, but what about energy? What about mass? What about all the stuff you're not talking about? When you just talk about space, just plain space, you got to add a lot more physics if you want to talk about reality. So there's 4D plus more dimensions having to do with size in first place. Size, energy content, time and size. How big? Okay, so this is talking about the varying sizes of tensagrities, right? Just get a quick jump back to full circle. And to bring the comics into it, that's what I'd call a comic book is kind of a scenario or storyboard with frames, right? Whereas anime is continuous, kind of manga anime thing. So just to say a few words, this is by an architect. It's from Lars Mueller Publishers, and they've been doing the most, I'd say, to keep the hard copy footprint of the Bucky literature going. Like really taking advantage of the fact that there's a huge inventory of really interesting pictures and stuff like that deserves to be published, curated, and presented in interesting forms. And Lars Mueller has been doing that, and the architect, Mark Wigley, is giving a very compelling and interesting take on Fuller's kind of contribution and how it was for him an intelligence gathering, is like education automation and creating a personal workspace or like a nerd cave for people was so they could monitor the world and like play world game. Like, yeah, you're getting your UBI, but we don't have to say it's for nothing that you're not working. Your work is to monitor the world and really learn about the world, really figure out what's going on. Of course, no one wants to pay you for that. They would much rather pay you to do your DoorDash and be really busy doing Uber and stuff so you don't have time to really pay attention. Because if too many people are paying attention, then people used to getting away with stuff won't be able to. It's better to keep you distracted, right? But in the Fuller universe, we're all kind of being empowered because our basic needs are being met. Just our basic needs are being met, that we have enough time to actually devote a lot of bandwidth to monitoring the world, you could say. And so it's kind of like listening on the radio and twiddling the dials like people always used to do with like shortwave, the people who were really like aware in the early days were people who were tuned in literally in the various wavelengths in the spectrum, right? They were listening on the radio, headphones, that kind of picture. Just roll forward with that. We're all kind of doing that with whatever media we're able to use. And Fuller is really designing his personal workspaces towards that end, freeing the scholar to return to his studies. In other words, get your attention back to thinking globally, acting locally. Okay, so scale, again, this one is about kind of the mathematics of size and like why are cities more likely to live longer, last longer than, say, companies. What is it about, size in itself that seems to create a mathematics of longevity? Like elephants, we can talk about animals, dinosaurs, huge animals, whales versus mosquitoes, how fast your heart has to beat, like in a city, traffic, how far out can commuters come from in a given day. These kind of size things affect time and size, they go together, right? Again, synergetics there, special cases are the time size added to what we would call pre-frequency, which would be like 4D without any specifications, not enough real information to create an actual situation until you add frequency, which is kind of where are we on the radio dial, kind of answering more questions regarding a shape is angles only, right? To add frequency is to give it a beginning, middle, and end in some story. I guess you could put it that way. This is a kind of umbrella terms that Fuller uses in his synergetics, which is kind of we'll call it a metaphysics, but again, he takes that word metaphysics and puts his own spin on it. So it's not like we have to go back to some Aristotle and figure out what metaphysics means and then come to Bucky with that. No, he'll do his own internal defining of terms, which is what you kind of expect from philosophers, and he does it a lot. Poets, philosophers, they tend to take control of their own key words and define them internally. Like even gravity and radiation. He listens and talks to Newton in terms of terminology, but he's willing to move gravity in his own direction with relation to another concept called precession, right? So I'm just giving you an introduction to that there's a namespace that I use a lot and talk about a lot in this channel revolving around Bucky Fuller's writings. And then to finish, the history here, Fuller and Kenneth Snelson, they had an interesting rivalrous relationship, which I got in the middle of on purpose in a way, in becoming Kenneth's friend and first webmaster before he got a more professional guy to do it. But he said I could keep the old one as part of the historical record. And he gave me this barrel tower, Kenneth Snelson did. And Underground Comics, Mad Magazine, Discord, Discordianism, Subgenius. These are all themes in my channel here that you can do some more bouncing around. Heuristics for Teachers, Fall 2023. Talk to you later.